there's something to be said about momentum and sort of inertia, right? Keeping the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on the inverse, there's also a ton of value in asking yourself the questions that you didn't necessarily have the space to ask before, which is like, am I pursuing the things that are right for me? Like, is this something like, am I doing this for the right reason? What is the right reason? Like these questions that you don't really have to think that much about when everything is in motion. Because when things are in motion, I think the focus is more like, let's keep it going, right? Versus, is it going in the right direction?
Welcome to Character. I'm Anne Benveniste. These are honest conversations with New Yorkers who inspire me about their journey to figuring out who they are, what they want to say, and the role the city played in the process. My guest today is Sutian Dong. Sutian is a partner at Multitudes, a VC that invests and incubates ideas that explore the edge of human consciousness. She's also the co-founder of the Global Women in VC community, which she founded in 2015. And it's the largest network of female venture capitalists in the world, with over 6,000 members across 250 cities in more than 70 countries. Sutian, welcome to Character.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, me too. We met last summer because we both work with the same coach, Victoria Song. But I was super excited to chat with you on Character because of your focus at Multitudes on exploring human consciousness and spirituality as well, which is something that I've been really interested, especially over the past 18 months. So I'm excited to talk more about that today. To kind of set the stage, I always like to start with kind of the background and
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time, yeah, exactly. Kind of get the context of you and where you're from. And the opening question I always like to ask is like, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you even have an idea? And what did that sound like when you were a kid?
Yeah, I did. And I think it changed throughout like my childhood, but I remember a distinct phase of wanting to be a zoologist or a marine biologist or like veterinarian, something along those lines, like playing with animals, hanging out with animals. And then at some point I decided I wanted to become a lawyer, which is really different than
It's so different.
being a zoologist. This was like when I was like more of a young adult, like in high school or something. And I was like, no, I'm going to be a business person, not really knowing what that meant. I remember being like, I want to do something where like the sky is the limit.
Mm.
And I sort of turned to business. It's like, well, like I feel like as a lawyer and as a doctor, I'm Asian. So it was like lawyer, doctor, business.
Good options.
I was like, as a lawyer or a doctor, you like your upside is capped because you're like an employee of a firm, right? And so you're sort of in the services business, right? You can only earn so much money as you sort of have hours in the day to put in. And I was like, but as a business person, like the world is your oyster potentially. Again, not knowing anything about anything, but I was like, I'm going to do that. Like, I want to do something where like the sky is the limit.
I love that. I love that. And did that just come out of you organically, or did you have people around you that modeled that like sky is the limit mentality or encourage that or is that just an innate thing that was in you?
Yeah, it's definitely not innate. In so far that like I think we're all products of like the things we're around and like you learn through osmosis, like whether consciously or subconsciously. And for me, my parents were always very entrepreneurial. They had immigrated to the United States and have built a number of like very successful businesses here. When I was growing up, I never looked at them and what they were doing and thought like, that is a model for what I want to do. But certainly the entrepreneurial spirit, that drive, that verb rubbed off on me. And so it was absolutely sort of a product of growing up in the household that I grew up. Drove me to really like look at entrepreneurship as a path that was very normal and celebrated and a wonderful way to like instantiate the American dream.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial household and I never considered myself to be an entrepreneur, that I would be one. Even in business school, I didn't take any entrepreneur classes. But I ended up running my own business. And while there's no, of course, right answer to how to live your life, for me, I've found the experience of running my own thing to be this it's like awakened me to the experience of life in a way that like I wasn't awakened before, because everything is reliant, like my whole life and everything that I'm doing is reliant on like my own thinking and ways of being. I'm like completely reliant on myself. And this has like, I don't know, awoken parts of me that I think were dormant.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I think that's a very, very common experience for people who like go out on their own and sort of become an entrepreneur in whatever form that might take, because I think it forces you to both, one, like appreciate independence, and then sort of as a consequence to that, like really appreciate interdependence in a
Mhm.
way that I think for many people you took for granted in the context of like a corporate structure, because everyone has like a role and maybe those roles get fuzzy or move over time, but you're sort of part of a thing, of a machine. And when you come out on your own, you're like, oh, holy shit, like I'm the janitor and also the CEO. But it allows you, I think, to sort of rewrite this script for yourself to say, well, what parts of like this end to end of running a business do I like? And as my business grows and evolves, like, where do I seek help from other people and create connectivity and interdependence between other businesses and myself? Where do I double down and triple down on my skills and strengths and like the things that really light me up? I think it's like a harder path for many people than like going the corporate route, so to speak, because it can be very unstructured and it's very like write your own adventure, read your own adventure kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think for, you know, if you really lean into that as like a feature, not a bug, it becomes like a much more rewarding experience, because I do think it also holds the mirror up to yourself, right?
It's a very raw version of living. It requires a lot of personal growth, and I like that. Okay, so you had this model from a young age of like, oh, I could be an entrepreneur, and like, you know, as a young teenager, you were like, I want sky's the limit, you know, on my career. And, you know, from my understanding, like you started in venture or early stage, you know, companies pretty soon out of graduating NYU. And it was from our conversations previously, I've understood it was kind of like success to success or strength to strength until it wasn't. So I'd love you to, you know, take us back to that moment. I mean, you can give us a little bit of context on the initial, you know, successful trajectory out of university, but I'm really interested in that moment of like, okay, it was all smooth sailing and then this thing happened.
So maybe like a succinct answer would be like hard. It hit me hard. I appreciate your characterization of my life as success after success. I would add a nuance to say like I think I was able to fall and bounce a lot, right? And so
Mm.
I just didn't really ever like scrape my butt really hard. And what I mean by that is that, you know, I was lucky to fall into venture, right? I was lucky to meet people within venture. I was lucky to meet former business partners that I would co-manage funds with and stuff like that. And that was, and it's not to say that there weren't like moments of doubt or me being like, is this like the right thing? Or, you know, and sort of questioning those things. But it was an experience where things always just sort of worked out for me. And that was something I didn't appreciate fully, of course, until things stopped working out for me. And I was like, ooh, that's different. It was tough because, you know, multitudes, what we do is we invest in and incubate ideas that, as I like to call it, explore the edge of human consciousness. And I'm happy to talk about that more. But multitudes, when we first started actually with a very different idea, which was to invest in emerging managers. So not invest in companies, but invest in other people's funds. That model for multitudes didn't end up working out for various reasons, but it was actually the first time that I had been sort of confronted so baldly with something that like I thought would work. A lot of other people gave me feedback that they're like, this is a great idea. Like, it's definitely going to work. And then, you know, you sort of take something out into the market and it didn't. And it was very disorienting at first because it's not like I haven't experienced failure before. I have, right? And like the roller coaster of feelings that come with it. It was really the first time that I had experienced putting something out there that didn't really work and sort of not having like a plan B, right, to
Mm.
bounce back from. So I just sort of like stopped. And that was new. I don't know what's next, or like how do where do I go from here? Definitely very hard in the moment, but a blessing in disguise, because I think without, it was almost like a period of like forced introspection or rest. And that was rare for me because I think without those things, you just sort of like move from one thing to the other. You just keep moving, just keep moving. And there's something to be said about momentum and sort of inertia, right? Keeping the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on the inverse, there's also a ton of value in asking yourself the questions that you didn't necessarily have the space to ask before, which is like, am I pursuing the things that are right for me? Like, is this something like, am I doing this for the right reason? What is the right reason? Like these questions that you don't really have to think that much about when everything is emotion. Because when things are emotion, I think the focus is more like, let's keep it going, right? Versus, is it going in the right direction?
The way you categorize it here was like, you'd never fallen or on your butt and like scraped your butt before, or you'd never not had a plan B. And in my notes, I have this thing of it. I don't fail at things. This idea of like, I just think it's a lot of people I meet have the experience you had where it was like smooth sailing for, 10 years or X
Yeah,
number
yeah.
of years, right? And things that kind of worked out, or they found something that they loved and they did it. And then they get to this point where it's like, oh, wait, this isn't working anymore. It's just like the first real moment of like something like more uncomfortable than they've felt before. How did you navigate coming to terms with that? A lot of people have the impression that when things are uncomfortable, it means I've done something wrong.
I don't feel like I had like a great playbook for that, given that it was my first time. And so the next time it happens, I hope that I'll be a little bit better
Yeah.
about this. One of the layers of thought or feeling that was most helpful for me to sort of like divide out or process out was this realization that like I actually had a very loud meta voice. And so it was almost like I was feeling bad and then I would be like mad at myself for feeling bad. And so you have these sort of a lot of different, I don't know if you'd call it like a manager in your head, or like a lot of different competing voices or perspectives, right? That were not additive at all, right, to just like getting through the experience, or like being able to like pull wisdom from that experience. I think, in terms of dealing with it, this is certainly not something that's unique to me, but it was important. I think going back to this idea of like, being able to bounce and sort of keep it moving and like a plan B, that kind of motion allows you to not have to can allow you to sort of kick the can down the road on like feeling your feelings.
Mhm.
And when you stop and there's nothing else to do, you've like sort of got to confront these feelings, like and like not like happy joy feelings, that like the feelings that you don't want to feel. Most people like don't really want to feel like shame or guilt or embarrassment or any of these things, and then sort of the related narratives to that, right? Like what thoughts create those feelings and create those framings. And so it was my first time sort of putting into practice the stuff that I had read about in theory, which is like, feel your feelings, right? Like they will dissipate. And I was like, yeah, sure. But like, it's just easier to not, right? And then you can just go on to the next thing and go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
That was a learning process for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's everything. I think a lot of us go through life feeling like life should feel, it should feel happy, right? And actually, so much of my work and my own process or my own journey has been, learning how to be with those uncomfortable feelings and making and moving through them and not being scared of them. Even now, if I feel lonely or disappointed or ashamed, I just go right in. But anyways, that's taken a lot. It's taken a long time to get to that point. And I know that you did a whole series of, I think, work on yourself, or you had I'm interested in how you navigated this moment from a modality perspective or from an approach perspective, and kind of how that led you ultimately to multitudes, I guess.
Yeah. From just sort of a modality perspective, I've been in traditional talk therapy for a long time. And as somebody who's like sort of a yapper, that really worked for me. I don't know that I would say, actually, no, talk therapy was useful, is useful. It was a great foray into self-development and self-discovery because it feels very safe, I think, to a lot of people, because it can be very surface level, right?
Yes.
You're talking and like you don't necessarily have to feel the things that you're like talking about, which is fine if that's like, you want to like start at the shallow end and sort of get in deeper. And, over time, I've incorporated like more somatic practices, sort of like mind body connection stuff, like stuff that's like very common nowadays, like meditation or breath work, guided visualization, other forms of therapy that are more somatic, like EMDR, internal family systems, family constellation therapy. And I'm also very curious, right? So I
Mm,
like to try a lot of these things to
yeah.
be okay, what's this that's different, right? Trauma release exercises. There's lots of things that I've tried and like with varying levels of resonance for me, right? And like it also depends on, the specific situation. But what has been really helpful for me were some of the like alternative practices that I engaged with, like psychedelic assisted therapy or MDMA assisted therapy or psilocybin assisted therapy. Those things I had heard about and known about, but not, really experienced for myself until, sort of push came to shove. And I was like, okay, like this is like I am willing to do a lot, right, to figure this out and to not escape from the pain, but like to have clarity on like what is happening, right? And where am I going? And like the sort of existential ball of questions that can hit you when you're not thinking about that much else. And my general takeaway is that, like, in the same way that, like, everyone's a special snowflake, there are different like, the reason why there are so many modalities isn't because, like, there are 700 ways to sell you snake oil. It's because there are different things that work for different people, depending on their circumstances and where they are and their access to even certain kinds of services.
So you went on this whole personal development journey. And one of the things you told me is that the change was gradual, like a sunrise instead of like a light switch. And I really loved that metaphor because I think that this is another part of, I think, these moments in our lives that people find really uncomfortable to manage and try and exit really quickly is because the process of change or becoming someone new or figuring out who is this new person or thing that I'm bringing into my life, it is gradual and it does require you to live in this like void or mist for a period of time. And I think that that moment can be really uncomfortable for people. Did you find that for yourself? That it was
Yeah,
uncomfortable?
yeah. I mean, the bardo or the purgatory or however you want to call it, for sure. Most people, most humans want certainty, right?
Yeah.
And so to be comfortable with uncertainty, or actually, you know what? Like I'll even go broader. To be comfortable with things that the majority of people are uncomfortable about is a skill that anyone can learn. But I think it's also really, really valuable, right? Because it allows you to be in spaces and places, whether it's a literal space, right, or a figurative space that most other people can't really exist in for very long. The entirety of life as I sort of conceptualize it is more of like a wave, right? Like a journey versus like a series of discrete stops.
Hmm.
And so it's not, I'm oftentimes uncomfortable still, right? I'm oftentimes in a place of like, what's happening? I think I've just learned to reframe that and remind myself that like in many ways it's a privilege to be there, right? And have that like those sort of edges of growth where I think interesting things can come out of if you can like just like get through that piece.
Yeah, I like it. It's just like reframing it as actually this is part of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the thing about change is that it really is, it's like I don't have kids, but with people who have kids, they're like the days are long, but the years are short. And it's super true. Like if you see your kid every day, like they're obviously growing, right? But then if I see a friend's child every 6 months, I'm like, wow, you have gotten significantly larger than last time. I think change can be very gradual.
Mm.
Right. It's the whole idea behind like compounding interest.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. Let's bring the finance
Yeah.
analogy in.
But yeah, it's like it's gradual and then can be very meaningful in I think much less time than people think. And I like to remind myself of that because as part of being a VC, I think part of it is like being able to give good advice that best serves a founder and their company. And then sometimes I can forget that like I'm like, oh, I can give myself that advice. So it's like both remembering to give yourself that advice and then being like, and you can follow it too. Like that's the second step.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you went through this personal development moment, and on the other side came out Multitudes in its new iteration with this
Mhm.
focus on exploring the edge of human consciousness. So, yeah, maybe you can talk about like how that came out of that journey. I think would be interesting, and then I'd love to just dive into more of like what the topics that you're working on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Venture capital as an industry has been around since, like, depending on sort of how you count it, like the 40s or the 60s. So it hasn't been around for that long as an
Hmm.
industry, as like a lot of high finance, right? A lot of like the hedge fund world and the private equity world has over the last like 20, 30 years become what it is, right? They were much smaller, more sort of cottagey industries before. And venture capital has always existed to invest in sort of the riskiest assets, right? Things that back in the day banks were like, absolutely not, right? We're not going to touch high growth, high scale, high margin opportunities. And a lot of those opportunities have been in technology based or technology enabled businesses because technology allows you to just like 10x, 100x leverage like so many things that we weren't able to do in the past. And so, my historical experience in venture was just that, right? Investing in like enterprise SaaS businesses, some consumer internet, like the application layer of the internet and above, like a lot of the things that you would think like a venture capitalist invests in, but what I became more and more interested in was other huge shifts that I think are happening in the world, which is like not how the world operates, but like how we humans in the world like believe, right? And how we think. And those kinds of ideas I think are just as impactful as like creating new technology modes. Like if we create new belief systems or new ways of relating with ourselves and each other, I think that's just as transformative because it changes sort of the operating system of our culture and our society in a way that like AI might change the operating system of like an industry. But that's all to say that like that's sort of how I see the world. And it was only through, I think a lot of the self-development work that I did and a lot of sort of frankly, like the medicine journeys I went on that I was able to personally see the benefit, right, of some of these like alternative medicines, get really excited about the potential of commercializing some of these modalities such that more people can engage with products, services, platforms, communities to help themselves such that they can help the world.
Yeah. So, what I'm understanding from that is like your experience, especially on the medicine journeys, of the way that it changed your mind or the way that you're able to think anew and the power of that is
Mhm.
what, like, because I guess what I'm wondering is like, was there a specific moment or thing you read or that really inspired this? The first thing you said around, now I forget the language you used, which was something around like the power of belief systems,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm wondering like what inspired that conviction? Like, what is it about, what did you see or read or personally experience that made you be like, yeah, it's really about the power of belief systems?
Yeah, I think in terms of like thinking about these new belief systems, it's my anecdotal observation of the world is that we are in a state of extreme flux, right? So you can see volatility everywhere and redefinition everywhere.
Mm.
And that goes from the individual level, right? As people fight over women's bodily autonomy, right? And in America, like you can go to the bathroom that your gender is, right? Like these things are like at the sort of micro individual level, all the way up to a global level where you see great tensions, not just on the ground with wars or almost wars, or we're not going to call it a war, but it is a war that's happening here, to the sort of not fights, but sort of like battles for power in space, right?
Mm.
And so venture actually also as an asset class, I think is going through a period of great volatility and change as it's maturing, as it's getting bigger, as it's sort of questioning its role in the value chain, so to speak, of creating companies. It's like creative destruction, right? Certain things are getting destroyed and certain things are getting created. It's like disorganization to organization. So the midst of disorganization and sort of like rethinking and reframing and like historical structures breaking apart, there is going to be a coming back together, right? And I'm interested in not just like how technology shapes like how our systems of the future work, but how we as humans driven by our beliefs, right? Our culture, our societal fabric, how we play a part in shaping that, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, of course. The belief systems that drive that. I think to me, like the macro and micro political and socioeconomic factors you just described, that flux that we're going through to me is why there is this also increase in a desire for more spirituality, more connection to belief systems. I think we're coming from a time of like materialism, like this, there are a lot of atheists and I think my like belief over the past 18 months, honestly, since working with Victoria and she's so spiritual in the way she teaches, it was very inspiring to me. But kind of this new belief system on my side that like spirituality in some form, some sort of belief system is part of a healthy diet for the human experience. And you tell me what you think about this, because I think it closes the gap between the known and the unknown. And I think what we were discussing before, like humans, it's very uncomfortable to not know, right? And there's always going to be these spaces in our life where we don't completely understand, or where that's going to require us to hold hope or belief or trust in some way if we want to take that next step. And I think spirituality or belief in something that, closes that gap allows us to do that in a more grounded way, or a way that's connected to ourselves, a way that trusts ourselves. Like spirituality creates expansive mental states that I think allow us to feel better as humans. I don't know. So I've been very interested in that. But what do you
Yeah.
think? Like from a
Yeah, it's a really great point. Humans, for as long as we've been around, have always wanted the same things, right? You can sort of think about it even as like to not to be overly simplistic, but like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you're like, okay, well, we want like at the bottom, like food, shelter, water, that would be great, right? And at the top is self-actualization. But in the middle of all of that is like you want to feel useful, right? To know where you stand in the world, to know who you are, who are your people, right? What is your community? Is there a God? Like all of these questions are sort of perennial human questions that will exist for as long as we exist, right? And it's over history, the rise of new technologies, right, and the shifts of culture and society have created both one, like destruction, so opportunities for new things to come in, right, but have also created these new, sort of de novo beliefs or ideas, right, that have pushed humanity forward in a different way by helping us answer these questions, right, with different technologies or systems or ways of doing things. And so back to this your point about spirituality, I think, it is a very human thing to wonder,
yeah.
right? And again, people seek answers in different ways. Some people are like, I'm going to go to space. Great. Some people are like, I'm going to go seek God. Great. Some people are avowed atheists and they say, I'm going to believe in science. Wonderful, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that the through line across all of this is the belief in something that is bigger than ourselves. And that bigger thing might be science, right? It might be like, I believe in gravity. I believe in the sort of the laws of physics. I believe these things are immutable, et cetera, et cetera. But it's still bigger than who you are as a person, right?
You could almost say science in its own way is a spiritual belief.
Yes, it's a system that is larger than one individual,
Yeah.
right? And it's a system of belief that connects many people together.
Yes.
And in that way, I mean, thank God for science and that, like, I think most people are like, yes, the world is round. Like,
Yes,
that's
exactly.
very
Of course.
helpful,
Of
right?
course.
We're all united in this belief and sort of like how we all follow the same clock. Like, it makes things simpler
Yeah.
and how people do business and how people relate to each other because we're all are aligned on some, I wouldn't even call them fundamental truths, but like things that most people are like, yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah. If there's a connection there. Do you have a spiritual belief? What for you closes the gap or helps you stay grounded in the midst of uncertainty?
I don't subscribe to an organized religion. I would characterize myself as spiritual insofar that I personally have had a felt sense of something that's bigger than all of us. And whether you want to characterize that as love or God or the universe or whatever you want to sort of name this, that has been felt real to me. And consequently, sort of it's not even very much a belief system as it is more like, oh, I'm like, yeah, there's something. There's something there. That belief, to your point about sort of expansive mental models or sort of expansive like energy, however you want to call it, creates a lot of, I think, comfort for me.
Yeah, I think it's all about that feeling of comfort. And so maybe you could talk a little bit more about some of the projects that you're working on at Multitudes. And then also we're talking today at Love Letter, which is an aura photography experience. I don't know if this is part of Multitudes, but here in Lower East Side.
It is related. They're not part of Multitudes.
Okay.
Love Letter is an aura photography studio. Very good friend. Woman I've known now, gosh, for like probably over 30 years now. But we started Love Letter to give people space to introspect and learn more about themselves with physical, tangible objects that could create, to sort of hold up a mirror to allow them to see themselves more clearly. Or photography was one of the vehicles that we were interested in, not only because it produces a beautiful, sort of aesthetically pleasing photo, right? But because the sort of colors of your aura, I don't think about these things as sort of like a horoscope or anything like that, but it sort of holds up a mirror and helps individuals both recognize things about themselves that they're proud of, they might have forgotten, right? And also see themselves in a light that helps them tackle the things that need to be tackled in their lives.
Yeah. I think that with all of these tools, I mean, I did the aura photography a couple months ago and it was very cool. But I'm getting super into tarot at the
Yeah.
moment. And, similar, I see it in a similar way as, I mean, it's slightly different than the aura, but it's always just a mirror for you to look at. And to me, often visual images or even something that's like made for you, about you. It just like allows you to maybe whatever resonates with you. It's like connecting to some sort of intuition deeper in you that's maybe not as conscious, or maybe you don't want to look at, or you had forgotten about yourself. And so I think they can just be beautiful tools of like strengthening, as you said, self-understanding or intuition and
Hmm.
all that.
Hmm.
Astrology is the same. When you read, whatever, Aquarius, I'm not super into astrology, but XYZ, whatever you resonate with is just something I think that you intuitively know about yourself anyways.
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
they're great tools of accessing deeper intuition.
Yeah, yeah. At my prior fund, I was the first investor in a company called Coaster Astrology.
Oh, of
Yes,
course.
it's not a tool that you're going to figure out like what outfit you put on next Tuesday or like should you go to the bank next Wednesday or something like that. But it's more of a tool that allows for a common framework of understanding between different people. And then also a tool that allows, that creates the language to allow yourself to understand your own self better and then to articulate that out into the world. So I think with all these things, they're tools for connectivity, whether they are connecting with yourself, right, or connecting with other people in a way that can be more seamless, right, than had you not had this shared language to commune with.
Love that. Yeah, that's a great explanation.
At Multitudes, we invest in and incubate ideas that explore the edge of human consciousness. And some of the areas that we focus on, though it's not, the sort of overall thesis is not industry specific. Some of the areas that we focus on are psychedelics, new therapeutic models, experiential spaces, some CPG products that leverage Eastern or indigenous practices. And again, like the through line behind all of this stuff is, and I say stuff lovingly, but because it's so disparate, the through line is that it's all ways to create or leverage new belief systems or movements or practices that create both self-determination, right? Connectivity internally, and then connectivity with other people externally. And those, again, like I think that kind of network is just as powerful and oftentimes even more powerful than a network that you can create with technology on the internet.
The network with other humans,
Yeah.
the belief system.
Because
Yeah, sure.
ultimately technology is still a tool that we're like AI hasn't like started controlling us yet, which is good. Ultimately technology are tools that can be used for good and evil, but it can be used for mind-blowing, industry creating, market revolutionizing things, but it's still being used at the hands and as a expression of the creativity of humans.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think we have to remind ourselves it all comes back to each other, right? And connecting to each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, and for Multitude specifically, one of the projects that we have going on is this religion called Cosmosis, and Cosmosis is a religion that believes that everything is everything is everything. So you and I are God, and that we are one, and that all of these beliefs and all of these realizations can be most easily accessed through the sacramental ingestion of psilocybin. The sort of core audience of Cosmosis and sort of the membership of Cosmosis is comprised of people who really do believe in self-determination. We create the experiences that we're looking for in the world, right? And that this new model of using psilocybin as sort of a key to unlock that portal will be a new model that enables the acceleration of creativity in the human species as like to proceed faster than ever. Because the thing about humans, I believe, is that like we can do so much, but we also like get in our own way a lot,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And so the only like for most people, it's like, okay, well, what's your biggest deterrent? It's you're sort of like, it's sort of myself, right? You're not like, man, if this one thing would change, like everything would change. You're like, sort of. Oftentimes, if you really think about it, you're like, the thing that is holding me up is not an external force; it is an internal block.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience with psychedelics. I try and do them at least once or twice a year in a very intentional way to support my own, yeah, unblocking myself and also my creative ideation. Oh yeah, I'm excited
Yeah.
to do more things with Cosmosis on that plane. Amazing. Is there any other projects that you'd want to talk about?
There's a lot of projects that are in various. We have something exciting going on with some of the earliest members of MAPS, sort of in
Cool.
more of the like the psychedelic field. A lot of these are still cooking, so I hesitate
Okay,
to
no pressure. I was just curious.
yeah, to
Yeah.
talk about them openly yet, because I'm like, what can we tell? Like, what can we say yet, and what can we not? A lot of my time over the last year has been spent on incubating and thinking about these things because again, like what we're looking at and what we're excited about is so different than what most VCs are looking at and
Yeah.
excited about. We started incubating in part because like the ideas that we wanted to see were like, we don't really see them, and so maybe we'll just start doing it ourselves and see what happens. I think if you're a technologist, like you're a straight technologist, you're like, oh, it's a very exciting time to be in this space because of AI and AI disruption and what have you.
Yeah.
And for me, I've as somebody who's always invested in like the application layer, the internet and technology enabled businesses, it's a very exciting time to be in this space, not because of AI itself, but like I'm curious about the second order effects of AI, right?
Yes.
What happens when like our identities change, right? When people's jobs don't exist anymore, when you have to recreate yourself in this world, when like the things like when again, like when everything is in flux, like those are the shifts I'm excited about pursuing because I think those things are much more, in my opinion, like much more important in the trajectory of where we go. Again, not to sound like super grand, but like in the trajectory of where we go as a species, because for all that technology can do, it's being directed by humans still. And like human belief systems, like the human sentiment about self, right? Human connectivity with others, the sense of interdependence, right? This willingness to even like protect the planet that we're on, like all of these things, like all of these intentions are going to be guided and accelerated, and we can leverage technology for great things. I'm most interested in creating products, technologies, platforms, services, communities that move humanity in a positive direction by not changing how we do things, but the way that we think and feel.
Yeah. I think this is kind of come full circle in a really beautiful way. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm excited. I mean, it is why it's like a privilege to talk to you because it's just like such a different approach to venture that I think is super exciting. So I love what you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
So obviously, this is a conversation about with New Yorkers. Character is, and so I do like to ask the question about how New York has influenced you, or I think the question I have here is like what has been New York's greatest lesson in this journey that you've been on so far.
So I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Houston,
Yeah.
actually in a little town outside of Houston called Sugarland. So it's as cute as the name would suggest. And New York, I remember when I got here, was a place where I felt at home.
Mm.
And I think that feeling is shared by so many people who all come to New York from like all over the world, right? It is a place where you can be yourself. If you want to call it like let your freak flag fly, like that is 100% true, and that you can be anyone that you want in New York. You're full of self, and that is appreciated, or if not appreciated by everyone, at least tolerated, right? And so that is, I think, just an experience and in a feeling that's really hard to get anywhere else. It is so much choice, but it allows you to test things and try things on for size and really like find the people who are your people, but also like the sort of community that you want, the beliefs that you want to hold, the principles that you want to live by, right? Like I think New York just offers you so much that it allows you to pick from like yeah, pick from an infinite selection versus what I had felt was more like of a finite set of things from growing up in, a smaller town.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. I agree. I think it allows you to really like figure out who you are, and it tests you.
It does. It does. That's part of it.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I think I would tell myself to be more okay with being all of me versus, I think certainly when I was younger, I was insecure about what other people might think of this thing, even though I thought it was okay. And so
Mm.
I would definitely tell myself to keep it succinct. I would tell myself to just be more okay with all the parts.
Yeah, I find there's like so much power in like even sharing the parts of myself I don't like or that I'm ashamed about or like even my like worst traits and kind of like talking about them with people. I have like I've struggled a lot in my life with like being very critical and judgmental based on like how I was raised. And, just like even vocalizing that to my friends, like, this is something I'm really struggling with, or that's been like so empowering. That's something I tried to hide for many years and I've done a shit ton of work on, right? But even
Mhm.
just talking about it and like owning that darkness, I think has been like a really powerful experience for me too.
Things are always bigger in our minds than they are in real life. You put it out there and you're like, "Oh, that wasn't so bad." Like, why did I wait so long?"
Yeah, exactly. And,
Yeah.
and then you realize that it's actually okay. And then it takes less energy to be yourself.
Yes.
If you had to put a message on a billboard in Times Square, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I thought about this question when you asked, and I was like, "Oh, how many sentences can I put on a billboard? And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
how small can the
I
font
whatever.
be?" Yeah, I think for me, it would be a message of self-determination. Again, right? I think it's a lot of the stuff that like I would want to have told myself as like a younger
Yeah.
me. You are okay, right? You will be okay, and like you can do it. Like it's just the stuff that's like so simple to say, and it's so banal in some ways where you're like, okay, but it is. I think those are like such important reminders of how okay it is just to be okay.
Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to share?
Oh my gosh. Well, if anyone is in New York, Love Letter is open at 138 Eldridge Street, 2F. It's a wonderful place to come by, get your aura photo taken, write a love letter to yourself or to anyone in the world that we will mail out for you, and to have like a cup of tea here and to hang out for a little bit. I do think that like for anyone who's listening, like, there's so many ways again, like, there's so many ways to find respite, right, and to instantiate change for yourself, and I speak to my experience of it being transformative for me, which is a little bit redundant, right? Transformative change. You're like, "Yes, yes, this is true." For everything that worked for me, there's gonna be another formula or another sort of another playbook, right, that works for every single individual person. And I do believe that the desire is there. It's definitely like you're definitely able to find the combination that works for you. And why would you want to do that? It's to live. I mean, it's sort of like the one life to live thing. It's like if you want to do that because there's something in your life that you want to change and see and be different, or you want yourself to be a slightly different person.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we'll put links to Love Letter in the show notes, but also there's going to be a Substack that goes out with this with your pictures
Nice.
here at Love Letter, and so we'll have a little, yeah, people will be able to find you if they want to come.
Amazing. Thank you so much
Okay.
for having
Yes,
me.
I've
This was
loved
so
chatting.
fun.
Yes, likewise. Thanks for tuning into Character. I hope these stories inspire you to trust yourself, bet on yourself, and do the work where needed. You are the artist of your life. Go create something unique and awesome. Don't forget to subscribe to the Character Substack. The link is in the show notes. Here you'll get photos of each guest in their creative space, alongside their New York City recommendations. I also share my analysis as a coach on why each guest is so aligned and thriving. And if you're enjoying the show, follow or leave a review. It helps other people like you find and get value from the podcast too. The music on this podcast was arranged by the New York-based artist, DJ, producer, and underground legend Michael Magden.